Hi everyone, my name's Arron Gill and welcome to 100 Stories Deep. Today I'm going to be reading The Jar by Luigi Pirandello. It was published in 1917 and it's translated from Italian. And the reason why I've chosen this story today, well, actually, in honesty, I was looking up the history of olive oil the other day in my spare time. And I came across this story, which is, sort of about olive oil, but it's really about the competitive ways that people go to win an argument, even if they're in the wrong. This is The Jar by Luigi Pirandello. It had been a good year for olives too, that year. The farm trees loaded with buds the year before. They had all produced ripe fruit, despite the fog that had threatened their blossoms. Don Lull, who had a good number of them on his farm, Le Court at Perismal, foreseeing that the 5 old glazed ceramic jars stored in his cellar wouldn't be enough to hold all the olive oil from the new harvest, had already ordered a 6th, bigger one from the Sant'Anno Stefano di Camarastra. That's where they made them. It was almost as tall as a man, beautifully round-bellied and majestic, like a mother, superior to others. Of course, he had picked a fight even with the kiln man over this jar. Was there anyone Don Lull didn't pick a fight with? He would pick a fight over every little thing, even over a tiny stone of a border wall or the wisp of a straw. And because of this avalanche of summonses and legal fees, suing everyone in sight, and always ended up paying their legal costs, Don Lull had gone half bankrupt. People said that his lawyer was so sick of seeing him ride up on his mule 2 or 3 times a week that to get rid of him, he had given him a precious little booklet, a tiny, like a misal, the legal code, so he could waste his own time looking for legal bases for his lawsuits. It used to be that everyone he was quarrelling with to make fun of him would shout at him, "Saddle your mule!" Now instead they would say to him, "Look it up in your manual." And Don Lull would answer, "That's right, and I'll nail you." That new jar, expensive and costing 4 ons in hard cash, while waiting for room for it to be found in the cellar, was set down for the time being in the grape-crushing shed. No one had ever seen such a jar before. It must have been able to hold 200 litres at the very least. Set down there, in the humid cave, stinking of must and all that sharp and raw smell that lurks in airless, dark places. It was pitiful. Something really unpleasant would come of it, everyone told him, but when Don Lull was warned, he would just shrug his shoulders. They had been knocking the olives off the trees for 2 days now, and he was furious, because he didn't know what to do first, since the people with the fertiliser, which had to be dropped in piles here and there for the new season's bean crop, had showed up with their loaded mules. On one hand, he wanted to help with the unloading of the continuous procession of animals. On the other, he didn't want to leave the men who were knocking down the olives, and he was cursing like a sailor, and threatening to nail first one guy and then another if even one olive went missing, as if he counted them all one by one from the trees, or if every pile of fertiliser wasn't the same as the other ones. With his beat-up white hat, in his shirt sleeves, his chest bare, all red in the face and dripping with sweat, he was running here and there, rolling his wolf-like eyes, and angrily rubbing his shaved cheeks, on which his heavy beard grew back almost as quickly as it was shaved off. Now by the end of the 3rd day, 3 of the farmhands who had been knocking down olives entered the grape-crushing shed to store their ladders and poles, and froze like 3 logs when they saw the beautiful new jar, broke almost in 2. A large piece of the front had broken off, all in one piece, as if someone, whack, had split it down the middle with a hatchet. I'm dying. I'm dying, I'm dying, exclaimed one of the three in almost a whisper, whilst beating his chest with his hand. Who did it? Asked the second one. Oh my God, said the third one. What's Don Lol gonna say? Who's gonna tell him? It's the new jar after all. Oh boy, what a shame. The first man, the most scared man of them all, suggested they immediately shut the door and get away quietly, leaving the ladders and poles outside leaning against the wall. But the second man was strongly opposed. Are you nuts? We're talking about Don Lol. He's capable of thinking that we broke it. Nobody move. He went out, stood in front of the shed, and cupping his mouth with his hands, called out, Don Lol! Don Lol! Don Lol was down at the bottom of the hillside with the men who were unloading the fertiliser, and as usual, he was gesticulating furiously, every now and then using both hands to tug down his beat-up white hat. Sometimes he tugged so hard that afterwards he couldn't yank the hat from his forehead. The last flares of the twilight were already going out, and in the quiet that was spreading over the countryside with the evening shadows and the sweet breeze, the gestures of that always angry man was going full blast. Don Lol! Hey! Don Lol! When he came up and saw the disaster, it looked like he was going to go crazy. First, he rushed towards the three men. He grabbed one of them by the throat and pinned him against the wall, yelling, God damn it, you'll pay for this! Then, when grabbed by the other two, their despair overwhelming their earth-coloured, sun-scorched and beast-like faces, he turned his furious rage against himself, threw his beat-up hat to the ground, punched himself repeatedly in the head and cheeks, stamped his feet, and howled like somebody crying over a dead relative. The new jar! My expensive new jar! It was brand new! He wanted to know who had broken it. Could it have been broken by itself? Someone must have broken it out of spite or jealousy. But when? How? There were no signs of violence. Could it have arrived broken from the factory? Impossible. It was sound as a bell. As soon as the farmhand saw that his first flash of rage had calmed down, they began to calm him down. The jar could be fixed. It wasn't too badly broken, only one piece. A good repairman could fix it, like new. The man for the job was Uncle Dima, who had discovered a miraculous cement glue, a secret glue that only he knew about, a glue that not even a hammer could break once it had set. So there, if Don Lol wanted, tomorrow, at the crack of dawn, Uncle Dima could come across and in no time the jar would be better than new. Don Lol kept saying no to these suggestions. It was all useless. There was no fixing it. But at the end of the day they let him convince him, and at the next day at dawn, punctually, Uncle Dima showed up at the farm with his basket full of tools around his back. He was a twisted man, with crippled and knotted joints, like an ancient scarab Saracen olive tree. You needed a hook to get a word out of him. That keeping to himself was a form of silence. It was a sadness rooted in his deformed body. It was also a lack of trust that anyone could understand and correctly appreciate his value as an inventor, despite not having any patents. The facts should speak for themselves, is what Uncle Dima wanted. This led him to be very circumspect, because he feared someone would try and steal the secret formula for his miraculous cement glue. Let me see it, was the first thing Don Lol said after having examined him at length, with mistrust. Uncle Dima shook his head, refusing to answer, full of dignity. You'll see it when it's done. But would it work? Uncle Dima placed his basket of tools on the ground. He pulled out a raggedy, bunched-up cotton handkerchief he had flattened out, and from it he ceremoniously took a pair of glasses whose bridges and bars were broken and held together with string. He hooked them on, and began carefully to examine the jar, which had been brought open into the threshing floor. "It will work," he said, "but only if you use cement glue." Uncle Dima laid down a condition. Dunlop said, "I won't trust it. I want wire stitches too." "Well, then, I'm leaving," shot back Uncle Dima, loading his basket full of tools on his back. Dunlop grabbed him by the arm. "Where do you think you're going, you pig? Is this how you behave? Look at him. He thinks he's an emperor. You miserable deadbeat. You're just an ugly old fix-it man. An ass. You should do what you're told. I've got to put oil in there, and olive oil leaks out, you stupid animal. A crack a mile long. With only cement glue. I want stitches. Cement glue and stitches. I'm the boss." Uncle Dima closed his eyes, pursed his lips, and shook his head. They're all alike. He was being denied the pleasure of doing a proper job, executed conscientiously like a work of art, and of the virtues of proving his cement glue. "If the jar," he said, "isn't as sound as a bell—" "No way, no way," interrupted Dunlop. "Stitches! I will pay you for cement glue and stitches. How much do I owe you?" "For cement only." "God, how stubborn can you be?" exclaimed Dunlop. "What did I say? I want stitches. We'll settle up when the job's done. I don't have time to waste with you." And he left to supervise his men. Uncle Dima started working, full of rage and spite, and the rage and the spite grew with every hole he drilled into the jar and into the broken-off piece to pass through the iron wire for the stitching. He accompanied the whirring of the drill bit with increasingly louder and more frequent grunts, and his face became increasingly green with bile, and his eyes kept getting sharper and blazed with anger. Having finished his first procedure, he angrily threw his drill into the basket. He placed the broken piece onto the jar to see if the holes were spaced out equally and matched up. Then, with his pincers, he cut the iron wire into as many pieces as the stitches had to make, and called for one of the farmhands who were knocking down the olives. "Courage, Uncle Dima," the farmhand said to him, seeing his distraught face. Uncle Dima raised his hand in anger. He opened the tin box that had contained the cement and raised it to the sky, shaking it as if he were offering it to God, since common men would not recognise its value. And then, using a finger, he began to spread it around the edges of the broken piece and along the crack. He took his pincers and the already prepped pieces of iron wire, and he stuck himself inside the open belly of the jar. "From inside?" the farmhand asked, to whom he had given the broken piece to hold. Uncle Dima didn't answer. He motioned to him to stick the broken piece on the jar, just as he had done earlier, and he stayed inside. Before starting to stitch, he yelled, "Pull!" from inside the jar to the farmhand with a tearful voice. "Pull as strong as you can. See if it comes off at all. Damn anyone who doesn't believe it. And hit it, hit it. Can you hear how it sounds now? Even with me here inside, go and tell your big boss." "Who's on top commands, Uncle Dima," sighed the farmhand. "And who's on the bottom is doomed. Keep stitching, keep stitching." And Uncle Dima began stitching each little piece of iron wire through the two side-by-side holes, one on each side of the mend, and with his pincers he twisted their two ends. It took him an hour to do them all. His sweat poured like a fountain from inside the jar. While working, he softly complained about his bad luck, and the farmhand on the outside comforted him. "Now help me get out," Uncle Dima finally said. But as wide as it was in the belly, that's how narrow the jar was at the neck. The farmhand had warned it was going to happen, but Uncle Dima in his rage had not paid attention. Now try and try again, he couldn't find a way out. And the farmhand, instead of helping him, stood there, doubled up with laughter. Imprisoned. He was imprisoned there, in the jar he himself had repaired. And now that there was no other solution in order to get him out, it had to be broken all over again, and broken for good. The laughter and the yells bore over Don Law. Uncle Dima inside the jar was like a wild cat. "Get me out!" he was screaming. "God damn it, I want out now! Help me!" Don Law at first was stunned. He couldn't believe it. "What do you mean?" "Inside there. He sewed himself up inside." He approached the jar and yelled at the old man. "Help! How can I help you? You're a stupid old man. How? Didn't you measure it first? Come on, try and stick an arm out. Like this. Now, your head. Come on. No, easy. No. How did you do this? What about the jar? Keep your calm, keep your calm. And he started to tell that to everyone around him, as if they were the ones who were about to lose it and not him. "My head is exploding. Keep calm. This is a new lawsuit. My mule." He tapped on the jar with his knuckles. It really did ring and sound as a bell. "Beautiful. Like new." "Wait," he said to the prisoner. "Go saddle up my mule," he ordered to the farmhand, and scratching his forehead with his fingers, he mumbled to himself. "Look what just happened to me. This isn't a jar. This is a device from hell. Stop it." And he ran over to steady the jar in which Uncle Dima, furious, was struggling like a trapped animal. "It's a new lawsuit, my friend. One that my lawyer will have to handle. I don't trust myself. I'll go and I'll be right back. Hold on. And for your own good, meanwhile, stay still. Keep your calm. I'll do what I have to do. First of all, to protect my rights. I'll do my duty. Here, I'm paying you for the job. 1 day's pay. 3 lire. Isn't that enough?" "I don't want anything," yelled Uncle Dima. "I want to get out." "You'll get out. But in the meantime, I'm paying you. Here, take 3 lire. He pulled them out of his vest pocket and threw them into the jar. Then he asked attentively, "Have you eaten? Give him something to eat, right away. You don't want it? Give it to the dogs. What matters is that I gave it to you." He ordered that the food be given. He saddled up and trotted off to town. Those who saw him thought that he was on his way to commit himself to an asylum, because he was gesticulating so much and in such a strange way and talking to himself. Fortunately, he didn't have to cool his heels for long before seeing his lawyer, but he did have to wait for a while for the lawyer to stop laughing as soon as he laid out his case. He got upset at the laughter. "What's so funny? Excuse me? It's my jar." But the lawyer couldn't stop laughing and wanted to hear the story again. How had it happened? So he could keep himself laughing. Inside, right? He had sewn himself inside. And Don Law, what was he to expect? To keep him there? To keep him there so that he wouldn't lose the jar? "Do I have to lose it?" asked Don Law with clenched fist. "What about damages? What about pain and suffering?" "Do you know what this is called?" asked the lawyer. "It's called unlawful imprisonment." "Unlawful imprisonment? And who imprisoned him?" exclaimed Don Law. "He imprisoned himself. It's not my fault." The lawyer then explained to him that there were other legal issues. On one hand, he, Don Law, had to free the prisoner immediately if he didn't want to be accused of unlawful imprisonment. On the other hand, the repairman was responsible for the damages he had caused due to his bungling or his stupidity. "Aha!" Don Law sighed with relief. "He has to reimburse me for the jar." "Hold on," said the lawyer. "Not the same as for a new one, remember?" "Why not?" "Well, because it was broken." "No, sir," contradicted Don Law. "Now it's like new. Better than new. He says it himself. And if I have to break it another time, it can't be fixed again. The jar would be lost for good." The lawyer reassured him that this would be taken into consideration by calculating its worth based upon its current condition. In fact, he advised, you have him give you an estimate in advance. "Thank you very much," said Don Law as he hurried away. When he returned towards the evening, he found all the farmhands having a party around the lived-in jar. Even the watchdog was partying. Uncle Dima had calmed down to the point that he had started to enjoy his strange adventure and was laughing with the twisted kind of glee that sad people have. Dunlop pushed everyone aside and leaned over to look in the jar. "Well, you're right in there." "Great," he answered. "Better than at home." "Nice to know. Meanwhile, I'm warning you that this jar cost me 4 ons. When new, how much do you think it would cost me now?" "With me inside of it?" asked Uncle Dima. The farm workers laughed. "Shut up," said Dunlop. "You've got 2 choices. Either your cement works, or it doesn't. If it doesn't work, you're a crook. And if it does, the jar, as it is now, is worth something. How much? You tell me." Uncle Dima thought about it for a little while. Then he said, "Here's my answer. If you let me fix it only using the cement like I wanted to, first of all, I wouldn't be stuck here, and the jar would be worth more or less what it was before. But all messed up with these ugly stitches that I was forced to make from inside here, how much can it be worth? More or less 1/3 of what it used to be." "1/3?" asked Dunlop. 1 ons are 33. "Maybe less. Certainly not more." "Well then, Dunlop, I accept that. So give me 17 lire." "What?" asked Uncle Dima as if he had not understood. "I'm going to break the jar to get you out," said Dunlop, "and you, according to my lawyer, have to reimburse me for what it's worth. 1 ons and 33. "Me pay?" jeered Uncle Dima. "You've got to be kidding. I'd rather rot in here." And after managing to pull out his gunky little pipe, he lit it and started to smoke, blowing puffs out of the jar's neck. Dunlop took it badly. This other possibility that Uncle Dima would not want to get out of the jar was something neither he or his lawyer had considered. Now what? He was about to order, "Saddle the mule!" But again he stopped himself, realising that it was already dark. "Is that it?" he said. "You want to live in my jar? Everyone here is a witness. He doesn't want to get out because he doesn't want to pay for it. But I'm ready to break it. Therefore, since he wants to stay there, tomorrow I'm going to sue him for squatting because he won't let me use my jar." Uncle Dima blew another puff of smoke and then he calmly said, "No, sir. I don't want to stop you from doing anything. Do you think I want to be in here? Let me out, but I won't pay anything. You got to be kidding me, mister." Dunlop, overcome with rage, raised his foot and was about to kick the jar. But he stopped himself. Instead, he grabbed it with both hands and shook it hard, whilst trembling and yelling at the old man. "You should be in jail. Who caused the problem? You or me? You want me to pay? You can die in hunger in there. We'll see who wins." And he left, forgetting about the 3 lire he had thrown into the jar that morning. And with that money to begin with, Uncle Dima decided to celebrate that evening with the farmhands who, having stayed late because of this strange incident, were spending the night camping out in the threshing yard. One of them went to buy provisions at the local inn. On top of it all, the moon was so bright that it felt like daylight. At some point, Dunlop, who had gone to bed, was awakened by an infernal uproar. He leaned over the balcony of the farmhouse and saw, on the threshing yard, under the moonlight, a bunch of devils. The drunken farmhands, holding hands, were singing and dancing around the jar, and Uncle Dima, from inside, was singing at the top of his lungs. This time, Dunlop lost control of himself. He ran down like a mad bull. Before anyone had a chance to block him, with a big push, he sent the jar tumbling down the hillside, rolling, accompanied by the laughter of the drunken men. The jar ended up smashing against the olive tree. And that is how Uncle Dima won. So that is The Jar by Luigi Pirandello. And yeah, I just thought that was a good story because of the imagery. It's very funny to think of a man trapped inside a giant olive oil bottle. And 2, because it made me think about when you're in an argument, does it matter who wins? Is it more matter to find out what the truth is and what right and wrong is? What's the point in winning an argument if you're wrong? So yeah, my exercise for you would just be to think about times maybe when you've had an argument or when you next get into an argument, rather than just jumping the gun. Do your research, think about what it is you're talking about, what you're arguing, and figure out what's right and wrong rather than just winning for winning's sake. Anyway, this has been 100 Stories Deep. My name's Arron Gill. If you want to see more videos in this series, click on the link below. Ta-ra, Babs.